Thank you. Well, I was governor of London for just over 4 years, and I became governor because I actually passionately believe in properly resourced comprehensive education system, open to all regardless of their wealth or background or ability. And I think it's quite clear, and as other speakers have already elucidated, sorry, I'm not used to microphones, have already elucidated. The government plans for all schools, and I think it's become clear over the course of the last week, that clearly is their plans, for all schools to become academies. It's an absolute and fundamental attack on the principle of a comprehensive education system, and really opens the door to privatisation across the primary and secondary education sectors. Now, I think just to understand the process at London and how it went, perhaps gives an insight into the attitude of the head and the chair of governance. Because both of them have previously stated on a number of occasions their absolute commitment to comprehensive education, and in fact have restated it subsequent to the decision. But given that commitment, I was a little taken back, to say the least, when we were presented at the governor's meeting with a resolution that we should express an interest in becoming an academy. Not only was this resolution not on the agenda for the meeting, but the resolution itself was literally written on the back of an envelope. No governor was given sight of the text of the resolution. It was read out to us by the chair of the governors, and we were forbidden from talking about the passing of the resolution or discussion in the meeting, even to our partners, was I think the phrase that was used. I found the way in which the discussion was held, the tone of the discussion, and the way in which the control over information coming from that meeting was carried on, has really put me in an untenable position as a governor, because I felt very, very strongly on the issue. I made clear in the meeting my feelings on the matter, and therefore I resigned to enable myself to speak out freely against it, and to join with others in the London School Against Academies, to take the report and take the campaign forward. Now, ever since the decision in March, there have been very limited pronouncements from the school. And I think, other members of London Against Academies, other parents have tried to get information. It's been very difficult. But whenever we have had any communication with the head or with the chair of governance, the response has been very much one of, well, you should leave the decision up to us or up to the governors. They're the people who are capable, they're the people with the knowledge and the ability to make this decision, which is an incredibly patronising attitude, but also fundamentally, as far as I'm concerned, attacks our rights as owners, as stakeholders, if you like, in the education system, in the education of our children, in the education of our community. And in fact, the head writing in London High, which I think is one of his only written pronouncements on the issue, made a statement that he felt this was entirely not a political or ideological question, and he resented any attempt to get politics or ideology into the discussion. Now, that's complete and utter nonsense. How can it not be a political question? Did it just arise out of the ether? Did it arise as if by magic? It's clearly part of the ideological agenda of the government for education. And, free comprehensive education as a right for all, regardless of wealth and background, wasn't given to us. It wasn't handed on a plate. It was fought for over decades of struggle by ordinary working people. And, now the Tories and, unfortunately, the Lib Dem lackeys want to turn the clock back. And I do see it turning the clock back to a two-tier system and throw education of our system, of our children, open to the profiteering of private enterprise. And make no mistakes, as far as they're concerned, this is a one-way street. There's no turning back. It's kind of, again, some of the arguments thrown out by the head and the governors have been, well, trust us on this. We wouldn't let you down. We'll look after the interests of the education system. Well, it's all very well. What happens when they're no longer there, even if we believe them in the first place? But, it's not a question of, well, we can give it a go and see how it goes, because it is just going to be, it's a one-way thing. We lose control of the school forever. And even the imperfect democratic control that we have through the local authorities is lost completely, as has been explained by other speakers. And, I think it leaves us with no choice. We've got to fight this, just as those who went before us fought for the right to a decent education. And that's why this meeting really has to be the start of a determined and sustained campaign to stop the move towards academy status in its tracks. You know, there's been very good action, I think, by the schools against academies and campaigns so far. You know, there's been a number of activities, lobbies and so on, giving out leaflets, and obviously, you know, this meeting is the next stage of it. But I think it's clear, as other speakers have said, that you know, it's not going to be just a case of polite letter writing or sending emails or whatever. It is going to be a case of taking absolute firm action, getting as many people involved in that action, to actually force the governors, to force the head to see the overwhelming strength of opposition to this move, and to make it absolutely clear that we're not giving our school away to anyone. So I'll draw to a close in a second. So, you know, I think we've got to plan very carefully for the next stage of the concerted campaign to defend public education equality. And it is about defending public education across Brighton. I think it's important we link with as many other people involved in education in Brighton as possible. And we mustn't shy away from calling and building for further action, including strikes, in order to resist these attacks. This government is hell-bent on undermining the living standards and social conditions of working people in this country. And just because that's their intention, it doesn't make it an inevitability. I believe in the right to a quality-free education for all, delivered through publicly owned schools that are genuinely accountable to the community in which they are part. And I believe that's worth fighting for.
Well, what we'd like to do is pass the survey round, but if you do have specific questions for Caroline, perhaps you can ask those at this point.
So, okay.
Yeah, so,
okay. It's good to have your support for the campaign. Sorry, my name's Aaron, and I've been involved in helping to mobilise the campaign. And I think it is very true that we're against all academies in this campaign. That's why it's called Barndean School Against Academies. And we are also affiliated to the national campaign because we want a good local school for every child. I think what we need to sort of have some discussion about is how we stop Barndean becoming an academy, because it's significant and symbolic and a linchpin. And it seems to me from attending the national campaign, talking to people and reading about it, that there are three factors that are really, really important. One is this campaign. This is a tremendous meeting. It's fantastic. We need to keep the pressure up and we'll have a discussion about that. But there's also something that Alistair mentioned, which is that in other areas, local councillors are taking the lead in opposing academies. And the third factor is the trade unions threatening and delivering strike action. And there's an example of that just this week of an academy that the governors that voted to turn it into an academy in Brent, Woodfield Secondary. But as a result of the NUT ballot, secret ballot, the governors dropped it on Monday. So the power of the trade unions is absolutely essential. But the question is, we are, we're very lucky. We've got, in Brighton and Hove, we're the only party in the country that's clearly against academies. We have you as an MP, we have the majority of Green councillors. What is it that we can expect from the Greens locally to influence all of the governors to oppose academies, but in particular and urgently, Barndean governors who will be meeting in less than 2 weeks?
Thank you for the question. It's a very valid question. What I wanted to do was to come to this meeting, first of all. I have regular meetings with the chair of all the secondary schools, the heads of all the secondary schools. So I'll be raising it there. I didn't know about the governors' meeting in 2 weeks' time. That's very helpful to know about. So I will write to the chair of the governors before that. I mean, as I understand it, as Alistair was saying, it comes down to the governor's decision rather than a local council decision. So, as I understand it, to the extent that the council has an input, our party, as you say, is against the principle of academism, so to the extent that it's appropriate, that would be the line that our cabinet would take. But as far as I understand, the whole point of this, sadly, is this is taking the school out of local council control. So I think that the main way of opposing it will be to put pressure on the governors to let them see the strength of feeling in the room today, because I think that they may well have underestimated, you know, the strength of feeling here. So that would be the first two things. If other people have got other suggestions for what we can do, I'd be very happy to hear them. Sue, do you want to...
Yeah, I just want to say that the Green Group has passed a resolution about this. It should have been in the press today. I'm not sure if it got in there in time. And certainly I'm writing to the Chair of Governors, and we will be taking to full council as well as a resolution to full council. Unfortunately, full council doesn't sit that often, so it's not to the end of July. We're hoping that the Labour Group full council will also support a resolution. Unfortunately, you know, we can't actually stop it in terms of we can't stop it because the governments can vote that way. But I think, you know, we have the people of Brighton Hove did elect the council. It's a very clear part of our manifesto. It was in our local manifesto as well. So I think, you know, that the schools should listen to that. The other thing is, I think, you know, since I've only been first a little bit, but I have been to a meeting of all secondary heads, and they are the ones who run the academies are really keen to work together to improve education in the city as a Green Group council. We want to improve it. We're not saying it's all wonderful, but, you know, we won't be able to improve it if they all disappear under a different control. So.
Does that give you some sense of our commitment to pursuing this?
Sorry. Somebody was just asking me something. I was listening. I didn't hear you.
I just wanted to make a point about what else the council could do. And one thing that the council can do, that officers can do, is they can ask the officials to get the financial details and to show what it is that the local authority provides for schools and why that's good value. Because that sharpens the minds of governors to see that opting out, you know, a lot of the governors think, oh, we'll opt out and it'll all be marvellous, we'll have this extra pot of gold. It's not that way. If the council go through the figures, it can be very powerful. I've done this, I've actually had meetings with council officials and they've produced really effective lists of the services, costed out, and that makes governors think twice. So I'm happy to talk the detail through with you later.
Absolutely.